We're at a turning point as AI has matured from a theoretical experimentation to practical application. In this episode of Utilizing Tech, we bring on Neeloy Bhattacharyya from Vast Data to discuss with myself and Allyson Klein how customers and partners are making practical use of AI. Welcome to Utilizing Tech, the podcast about emerging technology from Tech Field Day, part of the Futurum Group. This season of Utilizing Tech is returning to the topic of artificial intelligence, where we will explore the practical applications and the impact of AI on technological innovation in enterprise IT. I'm your host, Stephen Foskett, organizer of the Tech Field Day event series, and joining me today as co host is Allyson Klein. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Stephen, how are you?
I am great. I am so glad to have you back. You've been here on Utilizing Tech quite a few times over the years, and it's fun to have you back for an episode of Utilizing AI.
I know, I can't wait to talk to our guest today and to explore the practical applications of AI. It's fantastic.
Well, that's really what it's all about, isn't it? And as I said in preparation here, the reason we called this Utilizing Tech was because utilizing implies making practical use of. It's not just using. It's not just, oh, here's some technology, let's figure out how to play with it. It's making it practical, it's making it useful and making it operational.
I think that one of the things that I've been really enjoying and watching across the industry is that we've been talking about AI for a long time. Lots of the largest data center operators on the planet have been engaging in training algorithms for a long time. But what I think we're seeing right now is organizations that are beyond the Silicon Valley ilk actually taking advantage of this technology and really discovering what it takes to start implementing and integrating AI into their IT operations. And I love this part of the technology curve because you end up with all sorts of interesting use cases.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the things that came to me from AI Field Day, which we did back in February. We had a bunch of presenters, obviously some great technology companies, but we also had some great partners and some great end users. And one of the highlights of that event was a presentation by about how a greenhouse company is using AI to literally pick the freshest strawberries. And it's like, that's just a cool application. And one of the companies that presented there as well was Vast Data. So we got a little sneak preview there. And then earlier in March, we got a showcase, we call it, which is basically a special field day presentation where Vast Data brought in a bunch of partners to talk about the different ways in which they are making practical use of AI. So for that reason, we decided for this episode, to invite on Neeloy Bhattacharyya from Vast Data to help us to learn really how partners and customers of Vast are making practical use of AI, and therefore to help us understand how the whole market is making use of this technology.
No, thank you very much, Stephen and Allison. It's awesome to be here today. As you said, Neeloy Bhattacharyya from Vast Data, responsible for our AI and HPC solutions engineering function. So it's really cool, right? I get to talk to our customers, understand what they're trying to do, and then find partners, try to build an ecosystem for how we can help our customers solve problems faster, more effectively, more efficiently, all those kinds of things. So yeah, Vast has had a lot of success in the AI and high performance computing space. And as you mentioned, we're just getting to that precipice of customers really starting to you practically use AI as a part of their business. And we're experiencing a tremendous amount of growth alongside of that. So it's been a fun time.
So, Neeloy, when Stephen told me that we were going to be interviewing Vast Data, I got really excited because I've been following you guys for years. And I've been following you first in the HPC arena. And I'm glad that you're on the show because you transcend both of those spaces, which is really natural for those of us who get into the infrastructure that drives AI, especially AI training. But can we just start with why those two topics come together and what has come from the HPC arena to define the architectural underpinnings of AI?
Yeah, it's actually really cool, right? Because you can draw AI as an overlapping Venn diagram, basically, between what HPC does and what is needed from an enterprise standpoint, right? So from the HPC side of the house, we get uh, GPU based workloads, very mathematical functions, right? Lots of matrix multiplication, things like that. We also get sort of the characteristics that led to the first generation of parallel file systems, right? We get things that require a lot of read of a large amount of data, parallel writes for checkpointing models along the way. So we get a lot of the technical characteristics, if you would, from the HPC side of the house, right? The same things that can simulate stars can create generative AI models, right? And certainly the work that Google did in the Transformers paper, really revolutionized how we thought about neural networks. So that's the scientific side of it. Now, for AI, though, and especially for business uses of AI, we get a plethora of enterprise use cases and enterprise challenges that also need to be addressed, right? In HPC, you run experiments in essentially a sequential manner, right? You block time on a system and you go run experiments on it for that period of time, leveraging 100% of the cluster. You get summers off in HPC, right? And a lot of people go away for the holidays, and so they use that to life cycle pieces of the solution. When it comes to enterprise, the world is very different, right? You're not able to practically afford to block aside portions of large portions of your GPU farm. You have things like preemption, right? Certain business SLAs dictate, hey, something's more of a priority than what we were doing before. You have the need for a whole bunch of challenges on the data side. Enterprise data lives in 100 different places, especially today, right? It lives at the hyperscaler, it lives in SaaS providers, it lives, in warehouses and all of these places. Compare that to an HPC data set, which is generally speaking well curated, right? Um, and then you have all the resiliency and uptime and SLO, SLA considerations. Because if you're going to be leveraging, if, as an enterprise, you're going to leverage AI within your workload, within your business, you've got to meet service levels, right? And you've got to make sure that your data is being protected. You've got to make sure that you know exactly what the AI system said, right? AI is non-deterministic. And in business, that's not a good thing, right? That the fact that AI can say one answer one day and a different answer the next day, you're going to be held accountable for both those answers. So you've got to track all of that. And so, yeah, it's we picked up a lot from HPC, but there's a bunch of additional needs and factors that enterprise have brought into the equation when it comes to AI.
I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the specifics of the workload for machine learning, specifically around AI, that you're seeing supported on your solution with your customers, with your partners. What we've been talking about a lot this season of utilizing is sort of the different facets of AI, because
Yeah.
there's the training, there's the refinement of models, there's inferencing, there's all sorts of areas. What are the different workloads and characteristics of those things, and what do they need to support them?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And look, I'm not at all being self-serving when I say that a lot of AI, starts with data, right? It really does. You could look at any number of papers, of social media posts. Anybody who's a leader in the AI space will tell you the differentiating factor when it comes to AI is not the model or how you were able to optimize its training time. The differentiation really comes down to the data you fed it and what it learned from, right? And so the first portion of the AI workload is that data preparation step, right? taking data from the business, taking public data, taking third-party data, and preparing it to use with your AI systems. Now, whether you're using that for fine-tuning, whether you're using that for retrieval augmentation when it comes to inference, maybe you're using it for evaluation, you could use it for a bunch of different cases, but it all starts with data and preparing that data. And that's another thing that I don't think everybody necessarily fully grasps. There isn't one formula or one library for preparing your data, especially when it comes to multimodal data, right? When you're talking about words and sounds and speech and video, and there are millions of ways to prepare that data. And the only way you kind of figure out the right way to prepare the data is to experiment, right? Is to use that data, try training models with it, try using it in inference and seeing the outputs that you get. So it starts with data and preparing data. The second phase is, as you indicated, model training. And it depends on the use case and depends on the customer, but it's some combination of foundational models because you're in a highly regulated, region or country where you've got to have very tight controls on everything that goes into that model. Or it can be fine tuning because you really don't care how it learned to speak English. You know what I mean? Like you could start with a baseline that's learned some basics, and then you can fine tune on top of that. And so then the output. And the one other thing I'll say about model training is many times when we depict these drawings and these diagrams, and VAST does the same thing, we depict this as a linear process, right? Prepare the data, train the model, then go do inference on it. That's also not necessarily the case, right? So part of the experimental nature of AI is that you can actually fine tune a model for the worse, not necessarily the better, right? So unlike code, you take code, you find a bug, you fix the bug. Yeah, you could create another bug, but you're pretty sure that first bug you went to fix, you actually fixed, right? When it comes to AI models, it isn't the case, right? You could fine tune it, you could change your weights or your hyperparameters, you could do a bunch of things, and you could actually find out that the model that you created was worse than your original model at doing the task that you set out to do. And so then the third part is, the task that you set out to do, which is ultimately inference of some sort, right? And people think of inference, especially in this whole generative AI world, as strictly chatbots or speaking to the model. That is certainly one form of inference, but especially as customers really start to adopt AI into their business processes, inference is very much multimodal, right? It's manipulating a video, it's creating speech, it's automating operations in business with a level of creativity to it, right? Like one of the biggest challenges with traditional process automation is if the parameters of the world change, right? If the website changes, if the business process changes, whatever, you basically have to retrain your process automation. Well, when you combine process automation with generative AI, now you're creating more intelligent automation entities that can actually adapt to changing scenarios. So the inference piece of it is obviously where customers, your true end customers, your end users, get to interact with your models. And that's where latency SLAs matter. That's where audit matters. That's where all of those pieces become most evident.
It was really interesting to listen to your team's presentation at AI Field Day when you walk through some of this, because I think one of the things that became apparent is that distributed data that many organizations have isn't necessarily something where organizations have it completely organized, and they've got their acts together and they know exactly how they want to apply AI, their data to AI training. And Vast had a really interesting new platform concept about how to bring that together. Could you comment a bit on how you are working with organizations to get their arms around their data and whether it's in the cloud, at the edge, in the data center, how to form a common foundation to go tackle this AI opportunity?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We used to exist in a world where data was all about transactions and a system of record to store transactions. And then we moved into this analytics world, right? We've been there for whatever, the last decade, a little bit more than that, maybe, right? Where we're aggregating data into data lakes and data warehouses and lake houses and so on and so forth. Um, a downside of that evolution is we've unfortunately picked up this behavior that says you have to move your data into a location first before you can start to extract value from it, right? So organizations all over the world have spent tremendous amounts of money moving data into certain locations where they can analyze it. And what we've found in talking to our customers is, especially for AI, where it's going to need to be trained on and interact with the entire corpus of enterprise data, that's just not practical, right? And so one of the things that VAST has created is this concept, what we call vast data space, right? And what vast data space enables you to do is it enables you to stand up clusters essentially anywhere, right? It could be at a hyperscaler, it can be at a warehouse, it can be, in a set with a SaaS provider, wherever it is. And all of those entities can participate in a shared global namespace, right? So now, wherever your GPUs live, or even CPUs, right? Whether you're doing serving or inferencing or training or whatever whichever aspect you're doing, those GPUs and CPUs now have knowledge of all of this data, right? And so that the data scientists can start to experiment with that data, prepare it, train small models with it, try using it for RAG or whatever purpose they want to use without having to pre-move any data. And then as your jobs grow, what the platform is able to do is able to shuffle that data around in the background. One of the things that we announced, recently is this concept, or is this partnership with Run AI. Run AI does a lot of work around scheduling of GPU resources and CPU resources and memory. Basically, you feed your jobs into it, and based on business priority and resource availability, et cetera, it can trigger jobs. Well, by folding in and integrating with the Vast Data platform, we're now able to factor data into that equation, right? So now not only are you able to run your workload anywhere and access whatever data you need to access, but for those scenarios where data needs to be moved, Run AI is able to help us prefetch that data so that by the time the job starts running, the GPU and CPU utilization can be maximized. So yes, we have the global namespace, and then, like I said, on top of that, we're building a bunch of integrations and things like that to make that data space more usable.
One of the other aspects of the vast data platform is the database, which is essentially a conventional database or even a data warehouse. How is that used in conjunction with AI applications, and what's the relevance to very structured data for AI?
Yeah, lots of different ways, right? So foundationally, the database and the ability to store tabular data forms the basis of the vast catalog, right? So the vast catalog is critical from a security and audit standpoint, right? So if you're going to be using all of this data, you have to know who is using it, when are they using it, what code version did they manipulate it with, all of those types of things. So there's a tremendous amount of tabular data around the way that data on the platform itself is being used that we leverage the vast database to store. Then, when it comes to the various phases of the AI process, it starts with data preparation, right? And Spark is a very common tool that is used for data preparation. The traditional way to feed data into Spark is through very large files, generally in a Parquet format, right, with some metadata associated, etc. Well, with Vast, we have an integration with Spark where we're able to not only store that data in a much more granular tabular format, but also minimize the interaction or the movement of data between the platform and the compute that is hosting Spark, right? So one of the things that we announced recently is this integration between Sparks, the Rapids framework from NVIDIA, as well as the vast database, right? And so now Spark is able to take a look at a complex query or complex set of operations, figure out which pieces are computationally intensive, push those over to the GPU, and figure out which pieces are data intensive and actually push those down to the vast platform, right? So you're not having to, if you have to scan 1 billion rows, you're not actually shuffling 1 billion rows back and forth. The billion rows are being scanned on the vast platform, data platform, and then only the resulting records that are interesting are being returned to the application layer. Another big area where tabular data is very important is the inference piece of it, right? The model serving bit of it. As we mentioned earlier, for many reasons, legal, compliance, audit, updating training, updating evaluation data, you want to keep a copy of all of the interactions that are happening with your AI model, right? The prompts, the responses, the source data that was fed in, who asked for it, when they asked for it, all these various attributes. And the easiest way to store that is in a vast database. And especially when it comes to inference, because model serving is going to be done in a generally speaking, it'll be done in a pretty distributed manner, right? It's going to be done over a lot of different sites. Now, in a traditional approach, if you're having to keep, JSON files or CSV files or tables in each one of these locations and continually aggregate them over and munge them and process them, that's a huge nightmare in and of itself, right? So with the vast database, each one of these instances can write to their local instance of the vast data platform, and then just through the nature of our product and the integration between global namespace and database, we can now query that data in a unified fashion without once again having to pre-shuffle that data around.
Now, you guys have been on a tear, and if we were going to evaluate companies by the company that you keep, you've made an incredible series of announcements with industry leaders. Um, you've also defined almost a new vision for how we should be thinking about platforms of the future. Um, can you give me a sense of where you think Vast is going, and from AI Field Day to GTC? Talk a little bit about the other announcements that the company has made that really form the foundation for that future that you're headed towards.
Yeah, so I actually joined the company pretty recently, right? I joined it towards the end of last year, and so you join a new company, you talk to everybody, hey, what's going on? How's it going? What are our challenges? All of this. And one of the things that I learned is that one of our biggest challenges is the complexity of assembling all of these systems together, right? Starting with the physical layer, right? The compute, the network, the storage, all of those pieces. But then, compounded by, all the various software pieces that have been layered on top of it, and so on and so forth. So between Run AI, our work with NVIDIA, our continued work with NVIDIA, we do a ton of work with NVIDIA, but specifically what we're announcing, what we just recently announced is the Bluefield 3 integration, as well as the Spark Rapids work that we talked about. and then Supermicro, right? Who's also been on a similar tear as the was one of the leading providers of GPU based servers, not only for training but for inference, for data prep, and so on and so forth. So our vision is simplicity, essentially, right? As customers try to incorporate AI into their day-to-day operations, into every aspect of their business, how can we make it easier and simpler for them to do that? We've had the benefit of learning a lot from converged and hyper-converged and hybrid cloud and big data. And we're very fortunate that we're able to roll all of those lessons together for the purposes of AI, right? And then, it's funny, we have all sorts of conversations about where we're headed. And the reality is, and one of the things I love about VAST is we are extremely, potentially sometimes to a fault, customer focused, right? So as far as where we're headed, we're going to continue to listen to our customers and see what more we can do to simplify their world, right? So anytime there's complexity, whether it's around movement or data or access to data, or like we talked about with Run AI, meeting up compute resources with the right data resources, we're going to continue to try and simplify their world. Later on this year, we're going to be launching Data Engine, right? It's actually already in beta with customers. And one of the capabilities under Data Engine is going to be a Kafka endpoint, right? Classic example of simplifying. Why would you want somebody to have to stand up servers to accept streaming data only to write it down to the data platform? Why not just give them an endpoint that they can stream data to directly, right? So that's just one example, but that's essentially what we're doing, right? We're going to continue to work with our customers, and we're going to try and simplify their worlds more and more. Because at the end of the day, if we can simplify their world, it drives adoption of technology. It means that they can deliver more benefit to their end customers, and that's where the real win comes from at the end of the day, right? If you can make it easier for somebody to grow food or provide healthcare, build cars and build things that we need to make our lives work, that's really the goal overall of any of this, right? Not just technology for technology's sake.
That gets back to the thesis statement at the beginning, right? I mean, it's not about just using AI. It's not about, how can we make this thing run? How can we do cool stuff with it? It's ultimately about how do we do something useful with it? How do we, like you're saying, how do we grow better food or build better products or whatever? Now, I have to say, I'm very interested as somebody with a background in storage, and also somebody like Allyson, who's watched VAST from literally the very beginning. I mean, I have to say, one of VAST's first presentations, in fact, maybe the first presentation, was at Field Day, Tech Field Day, back in February of 2019, I think it was. And so it is very cool to see the company grow. It's also cool, though, to see a company with a background in storage that realizes that storage is not the end of the game. In fact, storage is not even the game. Storage is a necessary function, and then putting these things on. So I'm very eager to see where you guys go with, for example, the data engine, because it occurs to me that that's really where the storage industry has to go, irrespective of where AI needs to go. So sort of editorially, I find that interesting. But overall, I think that it's been interesting as well to see how the product has evolved to support the specific needs of these applications. Do you think, I guess, kind of stepping back from it, do you think that the inferencing market is going to be bigger than the training market? And the training market, admittedly, is huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right? In very layman terms, until you do inferencing, there's no real user interacting with the model, right? All you've done is create a model at that point, which is a feat in and of itself, right? These are multi-billion parameter neural networks, which are far from trivial to do, but it's not done any real work yet. In fact, the opposite. You've just invested a whole lot of time and energy and cooling and all of this, right, to build this mathematical model. So yeah, absolutely, right. Inferencing and really what's very cool about the inferencing market, and like I said, we've learned a lot, fortunately, from hybrid cloud and all of these other predecessor technologies along the way, is inferencing is going to happen at all different points, right? Inferencing is certainly going to happen in the data center. Inferencing is going to happen in your device, right? We know there's quite a few vendors out there that are very bullish on inferencing at the device, and we've seen some cool examples of that working. But then there's going to be a whole lot of inferencing that is happening at the near edge, if you would, right? At the points in between the centralized data centers and the device, points where data can be aggregated, but you can also get more computationally intensive than you could, say, at a device itself, right? So, yeah, unequivocally, the inferencing market is going to be tremendous. You know, I can't even guess, but many orders of magnitude bigger than the training market. You know, one of the things that Vast in particular is focused on is building partnerships at the inferencing level. We actually had a model serving showcase at GTC where you got to see some of the partners that we're working with from a inferencing or model serving standpoint. Yeah, let's stay tuned to continued announcements and continued partnerships in that area as we are very, very focused on helping enterprise users really extract value and get value from AI.
Well, obviously, a tremendous amount of development from vast data. One question that I've got is, where do you see enterprises in terms of their own adoption curves? And as we head further in 2024, what are you expecting across various vertical markets in terms of adoption? Do we end the year with AI as a vibrant and fully integrated um, entity inside IT organizations as a whole, or are we seeing a multi-year process by which different companies adopt in different parts of their businesses?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, it's going to be a multi-year journey for sure, right? There's just a lot of intricate business processes that have to be updated and evolve to embrace AI. And then there's also all of the regulatory and governance challenges that come along the way. What we've seen so far in the market, and Deloitte actually did a survey at the end of last year that validated this, is the most of the adoption in AI has been on the efficiency and cost savings side of the equation, right? How can I do my job a little bit faster? Can ChatGPT create a graph instead of me creating it? You know, if I'm a creative, can and I get writer's block, can ChatGPT help me unlock those kind of use cases where the availability of AI at the end of the day is optional, right? Because you could still do things the old way. You still could write it yourself. You still could create that table yourself or do that function. As people start to get comfortable with that, we're going to start to see AI be used to be incorporated into the actual business processes and offerings that are customer facing, right? So you're going to see that, initially we see that in customer service type functions, right? Where you're talking with the agent, and the agent may be a hybrid type agent. But you're going to see that folded into innovation. We've seen that in life sciences, right? Where the companies have been trying to leverage AI to do things like drug discovery and so on and so forth. So we're going to see more of that incorporation of AI to improve the offerings companies have, not just their operations, right? And through that, that's where the SLAs matter. That's where the criticality of your data matters. And so, yeah, no, we're in a multi-year journey. I'm sure there's going to be bumps along the road. There's going to be points where people get frustrated. But I think compared to any other technology trend, what we're seeing in the market is a large amount of adoption and also, people working with each other to, yeah, okay, this may be challenging, but there are other ways you can do this. So a lot of collaboration in the industry as well. which is great. And I think that's going to help sort of minimize that, that slowdown that you typically get with any sort of technology adoption.
Thank you so much, Neeloy, for joining us today and for emphasizing the importance of collaboration among all of the various companies who are duking it out in this space. I think for me, that's the takeaway message from all of these presentations at AI Field Day, our discussions on utilizing AI, and of course, what we saw at GTC. As we wrap up this episode, though, where can people connect with you and continue this conversation on artificial intelligence and other topics?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the time, guys. So vastdata.com is the easiest place to learn more about Vast. And I'd certainly encourage everybody to follow both Vast Data and myself on LinkedIn. Tend to push out some nuggets whenever I get them. So I look forward to connecting with many of the audience.
How about you, Allison? What's up with you?
Stephen, thank you so much for having me on as your co-host today. Everyone can find me at thetecharena.net and of course at Allyson Klein on LinkedIn. Please reach out. You'll see me writing about the tech space from data center to edge.
All right. And as for me, of course, you'll find me here on Utilizing Tech every week. You'll also find me on the new Tech Field Day podcast. That's the new name for our Tuesday podcast. And of course, at Tech Field Day events, we've got a lot more coming up soon. Thank you very much for listening to Utilizing AI, part of the Utilizing Tech podcast series. You can find this podcast in your favorite podcast application and on YouTube. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do leave us a rating and a review, since that's a great way to boost the podcast, and please share it with your friends. This podcast is brought to you by Tech Field Day, home of IT experts from across the enterprise, now part of the Futurum Group. For show notes and more episodes, head over to our dedicated website, which is utilizingtech.com, or find us on Twitter or Mastodon at Utilizing Tech. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.